Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Invincible Season 3, Episode 2. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So first and foremost, we start off with a flashback to kind of understand how Cecil got to where he is. And I'll kind of talk about all of Cecil's storyline and then I'll shift over to present day. But first and foremost, he's on an assignment and he goes into this place because he's trying to stop an attack from happening. It's an attack that's going to lead to 1,000 or so people dying, if not more. But he's kind of dealing with like some radicalist people who believe like, oh, the world needs to return to its natural order and the way the world is now, yada yada yada. Some extreme zealot type of stuff. And at first, the thing that immediately went through my mind is, oh, this must be how Cecil gets his scars because he doesn't have them. And we find out, well, there's yes, but also no, because it's deeper than that. So that was a whole interesting situation. I was like, oh, Cecil's kind of going on alone, doesn't have any backup. He called the whole thing off, but then he's kind of getting the crap beat out of him. But Cecil is Cecil, so it's like, right, even back then, he's always been really smart and crafty. So he's like, oh, that whole code, like, calling it all off, that was BS. That was like, yo, these guys are crazy, come here immediately. So the cavalry rolls up, even though it seems like Cecil won. Initially lost, but now it's like, okay, we won, just surrender. But they're so zealot about it, like, right, even if we're not here to see it, we are willing to sacrifice our own lives if it means seeing the world, making sure this world goes in the direction it needs to. So they activate whatever gas it is that they're trying to release. Cecil pushes them in there. I mean, that was brutal. It's melting. Not even melting. Their skin is like popping and peeling off. And like the woman, she's just standing there with her arms out. Like, once again, very like cult-like of like, oh yeah, sacrificing my life for the greater good. Because what's my life in the grand scheme of, as long as I can play my small role in changing the world for the better, you know? And so Cecil locked them in there with the chemicals, but they leaked out. And then Cecil's skin started peeling. I was like, Jesus Christ. At first I was like, maybe it jacks up his face and he gets his scars, but then his whole body started going through. I was like, hey, yo, and his eye was bleeding and popping. It's just like, I was like, Jesus Christ, Cecil. But it's like, yeah, they give him artificial skin as a replacement. But it turns out the scar on his face is because that's all that's left of his real skin, because everything else was gone. So he needed, and the moment it's like, oh, why'd you ask for that? He was like, it needed to be a reminder of the time he failed. Because I do think it is beautiful, like where he is right. What we see in the past is who Mark was at the end of season 2, like after the whole Engstrom situation, where it's just kind of, well, it becomes, and not even just the Engstrom thing. I'd say it's arguably Mark at the end of both seasons, at the end of season 1 and at the end of season 2, where Mark just felt like he wasn't able to do enough. First and foremost, it's like, look at how many countless people died. It's like, well, more people would have died if you didn't fight your dad. Look at the one person I killed. It's like, yeah, the guy broke your mom's arm, was threatening to kill her and your brother. Like, you know, bad guys are dead, good guys alive. That's a win. So, but it's like, it's such a complicated thing, and I think it's so beautifully layered, because it's like, once again, you see that, like, you know, Cecil was a man of principle, where it's just kind of like, for him, there was no shades of gray back then. Things were so black and white. But then we see that his boss, Radcliffe, voiced by Bokeem Woodbine, I was like, oh, that's dope. It was the one that taught him things are black and not black and white, that there are massive shades of gray, because there was an incident where, like, the Lizard League, at least the big dude in the Lizard League, but it's like, well, you have some solace in knowing, well, at least he's dead, because he's the one that Ray got big inside of and killed, if I remember correctly. It could have been the same guy, or maybe someone who inherited that mantle, but either way. Oh, no, that's the guy. No, like, he's the guy that ate Ray, but Rex was the one that killed him, because his hand was after the guy bit his hand, like Rex, it like exploded his head. So I was like, right, that's how the guy died. But it's like, so like some solace of knowing he's dead. But the two people that Cecil had to stop from that gas from, they show up and help, because it turns out Cecil's going by Radcliffe's playbook of just kind of like, right, these are bad people, but they're reformed and they can do good. So that is the thing. Even though, like, for Cecil, it's like they should either be locked up or dead. And what does Cecil do? He puts a bullet in both of their heads. because for him it's like these are 17 people that died, even though like more people could have died if it wasn't for Cecil. It's still the thing of those are 17 people. Like, ask their families how they feel, you know. So that responsibility of trying to do good, and then going to prison for his principles and believing like, yo, I stand on business that we shouldn't like have these guys out and about. They should be locked up or should be dead for what they've done. And then Cecil himself gets locked up, and he kind of starts running to prison, very a la Superman and Lois, Lex Luthor, because he kind of did that when he was locked up for like 17 years. Spoilers. But yeah, Cecil's kind of running to prison, and Radcliffe shows up, and he's like, honestly, there were, you know, some incidents here and there, but basically after you've been here for like 3 years, you've really cleaned up this place. And he's like, you have no idea what I had to do that. Because Radcliffe's there he's like, I'm getting an offer at a different specialized unit, which I'm curious where that is and if that unit's still around, if Radcliffe himself is still around. And so this was like 20 years ago, probably at this point in time. Yeah, probably a little longer than 20 years ago or something like that. But either way, when it's all said and done, he's offering Cecil the job. But it's kind of that whole thing of, you can be the good guy or you can be the guy that saves the world. You cannot be both. And it's, once again, I said it last episode, I get where Cecil's coming from, but it's still a thing of, you're kind of an asshole, but it's like, yeah, you have to see the world in shades of gray, because the world needs someone like that. Because it can't be all like so clear cut black and white. Like, there has to be shades of gray. Like, everyone plays their role. Even a Cecil in this world has a role to play, and a necessary role. And that's just, it's such a line where it's like, I get where Mark is coming from, and like I said, but I also get where Cecil comes from, but I'm also more team Mark. But it's still the thing of, you understand Cecil's like, yeah, you got to be prepared for everything, because that's what it means to protect this world. You're going to have to do some stuff you're not proud of. You're going to do some stuff you don't like that kind of goes against what you liked before. But it's like, if it means saving more lives, if it ensures the most survival of people, like making sure, like, because for him, it wasn't even just about, for him, back then it was like, even any life cost was too much. But in this situation, it's like, no, there's going to be deaths. And if you can minimize them as much as possible, then that in itself is a win, you know? So that, I mean, I think that's also why Cecil, he has such faith in Mark, but he's also cynical after everything. Once again, Nolan's betrayal cut deep. But as we saw, he was suspicious of Nolan from the very beginning. Like, and I think that kind of gives you some insight to Cecil as well. That in the time he knew Nolan, obviously it's understandable to be, you know, suspicious and stuff like that. But it's like, he gave that soliloquy in season 1 talking about how, like, I thought we were friends. Maybe that's also why. Maybe Cecil was suspicious of him at first, but then eventually he let that go. But I like to believe, like, no, Cecil always kept that in the back of his mind, that means, like, that friendship was built off of distrust. So, like, I think Cecil kind of goes through life never fully trusting anyone, which that's a shitty way to go through life. But for him, it's probably like, that's the role. This is what I got to do. It's just the price to pay for keeping the world safe. It's me being in this position, living my life the way it is, of not trusting anyone. That could be one way of viewing. Or like I said, it could be like, no, he eventually did start trusting Nolan again. And that's why he's so like, bleh. Because he was very suspicious of Nolan, like, when it all popped off in season 1. But to be fair for him, it's like Nolan up to that point had never done anything suspicious. So it could also be the thing of the reason why it wasn't so clear to everyone else, but it was a little clearer to Cecil. Could just be like well, yes, because I always had my eye on you. I always felt like something was off for you. So it's just kind of like what is the word I'm looking for, the phrase? Kind of a confirmation bias type of situation, where he's just like, I knew you were bad. I knew it. I just needed the evidence to prove. So either, like I said, either he truly, it's hard to say. I think him being suspicious of Nolan the entire time would be a sadder thing, because that just means he doesn't trust anyone. But, him being deceived by Nolan like everyone else and feeling heartbroken by it, because he's like, I should have. Because that's probably also why he's doubly hard on Mark for twofold. One, you betrayed us and I believed in him, so I can't let that happen again, especially because you're just like your dad. I mean, you are one of the strongest beings on this planet. The last thing I need, especially when your entire species, the Viltrumites, are literally conquering planet after planet and planning to do the same thing, enslaving our planet. Yeah. but it's also like, yes, like I made, and Cecil's always about not making the same mistake again. So he made the mistake of trusting Nolan. He knows that's a big no-no now. So with Mark, hey, I'm going to try and trust you, until you give me a reason not to trust you, but I'm also going to have these contingencies in play because that's just how this is. And I will not let this world suffer another Nolan. Because I made that mistake before, and like the OG Guardians of the Globe paid the price, and they all got slaughtered by him. So we can't let that happen again. So, and obviously Cecil was not well liked amongst the crew when he got hired, when he took the job. And I guess it simply comes down to like, well, he was in prison for 3 years, and like, oh, the guy kind of went, like, I don't know if they know what he went to prison for, but it's like you did kind of kill them in cold blood. So once again, I'm sure that's also plays a reason why he's also like, well, he understands where Mark came from with the whole Engstrom thing. Anyone wouldn't blame him. Once again, he's a bad guy that's dead bad guys. I'm not going to fight too much on that, but still, I'm sure that's the perspective Cecil's coming at from this whole situation. But yeah. So let's go with present day, where we're picking up where the last episode left off. And Cecil's trying to make it seem like, Mark, you need to calm down. We need to talk. I think we're past the point of talking when you literally walk into a room that's supposed to defend you against me. That means you're already in battle prep mode because I came in here pissed and you're worried that I might pop off. It's like the fact is you were like, oh, you want to have a conversation. We could have had this conversation in a hallway. You specifically walked into the room, danger room, to make sure that I would be in danger, that you would be protected. Because that's what I think is the problem is, like, Cecil, like I said, I get it. You're like, Mark is young and naive. He sees the world one way instead of seeing it the way you see it, which argument could be you seeing it from a very pessimistic point of view, a very nihilistic point of view, where you kind of see the worst in the world, whereas Mark wants to try and see the best in the world. But it also, like I said, you kind of need both sides of things. You need a balance. So, and that balance is massively off right now because both Mark and Cecil are at each other's throats, understandably, after everything. Because for Mark, it's like, these guys were bad people. Like, and also these preventative measures, do you have that for Darkwing? Do you have that for Sinclair? No, you have it for me. Like, you said that you trusted me. You told me repeatedly, especially last season, that I'm not my dad, I'm not my father. But it's like, did you ever believe that? It's like, I did, kid, and I do trust you, but I need you to listen and kind of fall back. But it's like, what you're saying and what you're doing are two different things. At least from Mark's perspective, understandably, where it's like, once again, you have all these countermeasures for me. The fact is, you have all this whipped up for me in case you need to, because and we as the audience know he's always been prepared if need be against Mark. He uses the thing he got in episode 2 of last season, that like sonic thing from Atlantis, from that creature, because we know it hurt Mark. And he was like, yo, I get the guys from R&D prepared. Once again, you hope that's to stop a Nolan from coming back or other Viltrumites. But if you ever need to, because you've seen time and time again, Mark has lost himself. Like, that Viltrumite in him has come out, and he's kind of lost himself to it. So it popped. It mainly came out in season 1, came out a little in season 2 in his fights on Thraxa, but it's like he was still mainly in control. Like, he wasn't like ballistic crazy. Even the whole Engstrom thing was a little bit of that Viltrumite coming out too. So, once again, you understand, but it's just like Cecil, he makes it sound like it was just Mark. It's like he didn't handle this situation the best either. It's like Mark came in, you already had your hand on your waist, reaching for your gun. That's kind of where it comes at. And so Mark proceeds to rip through like all the reanimates, or whatever he calls them. And so, yeah. And Cecil uses his weapon against Mark. Mark's trying to just bail because he wants the truth to be known. But Cecil's like, did you think no one here knows what I'm up to? Like, everyone knows that this is the reality of this is how you get shit done. But it's like, oh, I'm going to tell everyone else. So he's rushing to tell the Guardians the truth. And even like, they won't fully agree with you. Hence why you are trying to stop him. And so they're at, he crash lands at their base, and he's like, yo, Cecil's trying to kill me, and Cecil's like, that's not what's going on, kid, let's just go back, we're gonna get him. And it's like, well, he doesn't want to go with you. And then like the rest of the Guardians are like, yo, this seems kind of effed up. And then like the reanimators are there, so like even Rex said it. He was like, man, fuck this. And they all help out Invincible. Understandably, because it's like, yo, we don't fully know what's going on, but you're hurting Mark. Like, this doesn't seem right. And even Monster Girl is trying to tell him, like, yo, stop. And he won't. So it turns into a whole thing. Rex destroys the device, but that just makes it so that it's got a dead man switch, so it keeps going. And so Mark's there spinning on the floor, crying out in pain. And yeah, the moment Rudy finally fixes the situation, Mark obliterates him. I mean, there's 2 occasions throughout the White Room situation and the Guardians of the Globe base situation where he punched someone and literally obliterated their entire body, leaving only their legs behind. He did it twice. So yeah, and he was just slicing and dicing and ripping people apart. You can tell the rest of the squad was a little scared because it's like, Jesus, because they've never seen Mark really go ham like that. They've never seen that. Once again, no one saw what he did to Engstrom Levy except for Mark, you know? I mean, that we're aware of. Other people might have, like, came across that body on that planet, but nevertheless. And then Cecil proceeds to run his mouth, being like, look what you did, Mark. Look at this mess. This is on you. Like, the fact of the matter is kind of like, don't you ever threaten me again. And Mark just kind of went up and grabbed him by the throat. It's like, I'm never working with you again. I'm never coming back. If you ever come near anyone, my family, ever again, I will kill you. And then tells Rudy that, yo, get this fucking thing out of my head, and then bounces afterwards. And now we have a divide in the aftermath of all of this between the Guardians, because you have Rex, Ray, Monster Girl, and Bulletproof, who are all bouncing because they think like what Cecil did was effed up, because it made Ray, like when she's looking at the devastation, she's like, I remember what happened last season. And for her, it's like, understandably, it's something traumatic like that. For her, it's like, you know, it becomes that conversation of, if he's willing to do that to Mark, what does that mean for the rest of us? Like, yes, we're all tools, we're all weapons in his arsenal that he'll use up and take advantage of, but the moment we're no longer useful, he will toss us aside. But you have people like Samson kind of seeing like, yes, he went too far, but also that's on Invincible. And Immortal's kind of like, well, yeah, Invincible has gotten it too good for too long. He needs to be soft on him, like the fact, because he always had that perception, especially last season as well, where he looked at Mark and all he saw was Nolan and what Nolan did. And even though, you know, when they were dealing with the whole Mars and the Sequoid situation, he, you know, kind of like gave the pass to Mark in that moment in time, but that never fully went away. Because he even admitted last season, he's like, my inability to trust Mark almost screwed up the mission. I'm not in the right headspace after losing Kate. But now he's got Kate back, and he's, you know, talking his shit. So, but then I think it was Monster Girl that was like, yo, what are you talking about? Mark nearly died because of his dad. You know, and it's just like, we're just going to forget about that. Like, he's done nothing but fight for this planet. You know, he didn't have to, like, go against his dad, and he did. He chose to fight for this planet. And now it's like, were we going to, like, second guess him and treat him like he's exactly like his dad? And it's just like, then you have like the Kate and Ray of it all, where it becomes a thing of, you know, Kate's minimizing what Ray went through, saying like, well, I'm not the one that's just so scared just because I almost died. She's like, look at me, like, I went through some terrible stuff too. But then Ray's like, you didn't go through what I and Rex did. We both only have one life. When we're done, we're cooked, we're done. But you're the one that hid away like a copy of yourself. And yes, she feels all that death and pain, but you had Rex kind of, because Kate was trying to minimize what Ray went through and the trauma of it all. But it's just like they started getting heated. And so sometimes you'll probably say stuff that you don't fully mean, but the argument could be, no, when you're angry is when how you really feel comes out. Like, that's already been buried deep underneath. Because you're going to make the argument with Ray. It's like, despite everything I went through, I came back. What about you, Kate? You took a long hiatus. Me, I took a hiatus off because I was actually going through rehab, getting back up to snuff. You just disappeared, let everyone think you were dead. Like, it's been over 3 months because, once again, there's been 3 months between the season 2 finale and the premiere. So you've been MIA for months because everyone still thought you were dead, and you were going to let that continue. But so it is the thing of, like, your head wasn't in the right space either. You needed time to come back as well. Once again, the Kate that's in front of him ain't really the OG Katie, because she's and someone can correct me, I wasn't paying as much attention, but I'm pretty sure it was 1. Maybe it was 0, but I still think 0 is back at the cabin, But I could be mistaken. So yeah, the entire Guardians has split. Immortal's like, if you want to leave, you can leave. So Samson's staying. Shapesmith is saying, because it's like, well, Cecil kind of forgave me for all the stuff I did on Mars. And then there's also the whole, like, he gave me like a race car bet, so I'm gonna stay with Cecil. I'm staying with Cecil. So there's only 4 of them left now, and the others leave because Rudy does too. And I was actually shocked because I was kind of thinking Rudy was going to stay with Cecil, but it's like, no, he went with Monster Girl. I was like, well, doesn't necessarily make your decision all that altruistic, because I'm like, well, you're going because Monster Girl's going. But then we find out with his conversation with Samson, because Samson was like, nah, just tell her you're going for her. And he's like, yeah, I'll keep that advice. But he's also like, that's not the only reason, is it? And Rudy is clear about it. It's like, Invincible's the strongest hero on this planet, and someday in the future, I might need him on my side. So you're like, wow, he's being very practical about this. Which even Samson's like, oh, that's code. But at the same time, I'm still going to miss you, dude. So, because even Immortal was like, don't worry, they'll be back after like 2 hours. And then even Samson was like, I don't think so. And they didn't. So now it's a thing of, the reanimators will back you up for a little bit, and eventually you'll be able to have some tryouts to bring in new members. And then there's also the whole situation with, like, oh, Darkwing is joining. Because even they had their, like, ugh, when Darkwing showed up. But it's like, well, we'll join forces together, yada, yada, yada. It's like, can we also not questioning how Cecil got them? Sinclair's working with Cecil because he gets to do whatever he wants to. It's kind of a thing of, as long as I get to be in my mad scientist bag, I don't care, like, that I have to work for you. As long as I'm able to do my work in other, like, Cecil probably gives him the go-ahead on some other projects. There might also be some, like, shady stuff he's doing that Cecil isn't aware, but you're kind of like, nah, Cecil's definitely probably aware of everything that Sinclair's doing. But there's the whole Doc Seismic situation kind of blindsided them. So, obviously, Cecil isn't foolproof. He is only human, despite how smart he is, how he's always kind of got his eye on the ball. Like, even he can get blindsided. Hell, once again, the Nolan thing blindsided him like crazy. So it's not like he's infallible and that he's omnipotent and knows everything. He's not. So stuff will fall through the cracks. So Sinclair could be working on some stuff that will make, at the end of the day, make Cecil have to eat his own word type of situation. So, because Cecil's not coming at this from the perspective of, well, people can... Well, he did kind of come at it from the perspective of people can change, but it's like, do you even really... Well, I was about to say he can believe that, because he used to be just like Mark. That's why when he's looking at Mark, he's seeing so much of who he used to be, but it's like, oh, that's who I was. I was young and naive. I didn't know the way the world works until, like, someone slapped me in the face. And I almost wondered if this is supposed to be Cecil's version of Radcliffe. Like, Radcliffe is like, oh, you were here in this prison? He's like, I kept an eye on you. Basically, it was almost like your test of sorts. So I'm wondering, is he going to be like, kind of like that with Mark? Or is he like, well, actually, no, this bridge actually did legitimately get burned. Like, I'm curious to see in the long run. Because I feel like Cecil's smart enough to handle that situation better than he did. But that's why I'm wondering, like, is this some long con and long play to basically get Mark to come to understand everything by the end of this season or not? Whether this will translate over into the next season or whether this is just a season 3 element, we'll have to wait to see whether this sticks or not. I get the feeling like, just having, once again, knowing nothing about Invincible, that this show is my only experience with the story because I've never read the comic. It feels like Marcus will come back to work with him, because he'll probably come, like, a situation will happen will make him realize, like, Cecil was right and they will probably have to work together. We'll have to wait to see. Maybe it'll be a thing of, like, Mark's not, no, I'll forever always be on my own. I'll join forces with some people here and there, but, like, Nolan was basically all on his own too. So, I mean, to be fair, Invincible never, well, I was about to say last season because he was directly working under Cecil last season. So, not part of the Guardians, but he was definitely part of working for Cecil. So we'll see whether he goes back on that or whether he stands 10 toes down with that whole decision going forward. Like there's most of the obviously season left, so a lot can end up happening to change that. But before I was going on that diatribe, my whole point was I was wondering, did Cecil really believe people can change? And yes, like I was saying, he does because he himself had changed and he'd seen that and realized that. But I'd also was about to say, like, but not from the reformist position of, oh, these criminals can change. Maybe he still does lump that all in, that people can change and do good for the greater good. And even if they're not, he probably has contingencies in place for Sinclair, Darkwing. But once again, even if you do, that doesn't make them foolproof. So it's just kind of like you're playing quite the gamble and gambit with that whole situation. So obviously Debbie is not happy at all about the fallout of this whole situation, you know. And so Mark is explaining everything to his mom, and even Oliver's like, well, why didn't you just kill Cecil? But for Mark, it's like, we don't do that. He's like, yeah, but you threatened to. He's like, yeah, I did it to scare him, to make him see that I was serious, but we don't do that. We don't kill people. And you're just like, yeah, that's, ooh. Because, and even that point where, like, Oliver's like, well, I could go out there. Mom said you can train me. She's like, yes, training and actually helping are two different things. It's like, you just need to take it slow. Mark didn't get his powers till he was 17. He got to live a normal life. I want that for you. And even Mark is like, don't rush it, buddy. Trust me. It's like he wanted this so badly, and it's just like like getting his powers was probably one of the worst things that happened to him because it set so much stuff in motion. But if he hadn't gotten his powers, like, it's like, once again, would I have just been enslaved like any other human that you were planning, that you and the Viltrum Empire were planning on? Would you just enslave me like you did everyone else? So when it's all said and done, we'll see, but things are definitely going to escalate on the Oliver front. Well, that kind of screwed Cecil too, because he had his eye on Oliver. So you're kind of your things are super not cool with Mark. So that's a big negative on Oliver as well. So then we also had the whole Mark and Eve of it all, where Eve kind of explains her issues more. It isn't just about, because Mark's like, no, like, I know how I feel about you. It isn't just about like what some future different version of you says. She's like, no, it's not even about you. She's like, I felt humiliated. I mean, that was me in the future. What? That was me 20 years from now. So that was me like, what, 40? A 40-year-old me couldn't get over like whatever happened between us. And Mark's like, well, we don't know what, she's a different version of you. We have no idea what happened in her life. But she was like, yeah, but like the fact is I was sad and just like I couldn't get over it, that she had to warn you to either be with me or break up with me. Once again, like, that was a Mark that also got changed because of that time he spent alone after the Angstrom stuff. Like, once again, like, it's like you wouldn't like who you'd become. So I mean, there's also that thing where they're kind of like, well, Mark, you're not your dad and stuff like that. But it's also like, yeah, but there's so many versions of the world in the universe, the multiverse, where he is a version of his dad, whether it's that version after the Angstrom situation, whether it's the multitude of Marks that worked alongside his dad to slaughter people. But that's also the point of, well, this Mark isn't them. I mean, that's also another thing I didn't even think about, because I was like, right, Mark came across all those other versions, and should he be held to be the same person that Angstrom blamed him to be? Once again, Angstrom wasn't fully in his right minds. But it's like, yeah, Angstrom only saw you as all the other Marks that did terrible things to all the other worlds, to all the other Angstroms. But what about, look at this Eve, who, even though it's from the same universe, it's still like a different time where things played out differently. So I didn't even think about that parallel last episode. Because Mark talks about the fact is he's always kind of had feelings for Eve, but it's like, well, you were dating Rex, then I started dating Amber, and I fell in love with her. But so any feelings I had for you, I buried them deep down, and now they're just coming to the surface after everything. But for her, it's like, I don't want this just to be like, how serious are you about this? Like, because she's like, I don't want this just to be some high school crush. She's like, no, it's not. She's like, we both need to figure things out. I will be there for you, just we can't date right now. We got to both figure us out. But at the end of the episode, Mark tells her, like, when I was dying on the floor, like when Cecil was scrambling my brains and I thought I might die, you were what I was thinking about. That I might not ever get to see you again. So it's like, yes, you are that important to me. And even if I'm not that important to you, but if you feel like half as much as the way I feel about you, then we should give this a shot, you know? So it is official. Once again, just those little comic things you come across where I'm like, I think they have their complicated history in the comics. It's kind of a spoiler, but I think it all works out in the end. But I feel like there's going to be a bumpy road. I mean, where the story is right now, what Mark's probably about to go through with his blue suit arc. Once again, I have my theories on what that means in the grand scheme of things. I don't know what it means in the grand story arc for this season, but still. But for now, they're together. It's some happiness in the storm that is this whole shitstorm that is this whole situation. Which, speaking of shitstorms, obviously Mark ended up telling Rick and William about Cecil and the whole Sinclair of it all, and so that's a lot. But Rick is like, at the end of the day, knowing is better. The truth is better, no matter how much it hurts. But for Mark, he starts questioning, maybe I should have killed Sinclair. And it's like, no, you shouldn't have, because that would make you like Sinclair. Like, the world needs less of that. They need more people like Invincible. So I am worried that Rick is probably going to pop off and end up like attacking and killing Sinclair later on, just because. We'll see if it ends up going that route. But I just felt like him knowing that, I'm like, ooh, that feels like that could turn nastier. That could be a problem later on. But we'll see. We also have the situation with Debbie really quickly. Speaking of Mark and Eve's romance, we have Paul and Debbie, because there's a whole nature of like, oh, didn't know where we were because you didn't really contact me. So I'm glad to see that we're here. Things are awkward. It's like, well, she hasn't been on a date in like 20-ish years. But it's also like, you know, it's like, oh, like you had the whole lie about like, oh yeah, the house, the gas explosion. And it's like, oh yeah, like, you know, how's Mark? He's going to college. Oh, I actually know he's trying some other stuff. You know, raising him and Oliver, they, you know, some challenges. Like, oh, I didn't know your children were special needs. She's like, they're not. Well, I mean, they are. And it's like, I mean, in the regards of like, there are challenges, like, you know, there are special needs in regards of like what their situation. It's like, can't really explain that. Like, well, my kids have superpowers. You know, can't really explain that, because, you know, it comes back to that Mark and Amber situation of, well, you got to decide whether this person's important enough in your life that you're going to tell them about, you know, every aspect of your life. So, you know, and he's like, well, if this is too soon, I understand. She's like, no, it's not. But she's like, maybe it is. She doesn't know. So Debbie's got to still figure stuff out, which we know Nolan's up there in his Viltrumite prison being like, oh, I missed my wife. So coming back, finding you with someone else, which he has no right to judge anything. He had no right to even say, I miss my wife. But we'll have to wait to see if anything becomes of that, where that stands. 'Cause Debbie's not taking him back no matter what. You might be the father of her children, but that doesn't mean jack shit. So, but that doesn't change the fact that Nolan will probably be a possessive asshole and try to make things right. But it's like, I'm sure that's going to play a role in this too. Like, how much can you forgive someone? It's like Mark is kind of forgiving his dad, but not really. It's like so much got spraying on him. The new wife, the half son, the Viltrumites attacked before they could really, really fully work everything out. So, and now you think your dad's about to be executed. So that's something in the back of your mind too. So, there's a lot there where it's like, so have you forgiven your dad because he made mistakes? Do you think he should be put down? That'd be the hypocrisy of it. Like, oh, you're saying all this about Sinclair, you're saying this about Darkwing. Well, would you have that same energy for your dad? And to some extent, yes, but to other extents, no. So once again, you're a teenager, you're 19. So much of the world is still like, so much of this universe and how things are. Like, once again, maybe you have a naive point of view, but it's also a necessary, I think, element to being a hero, so you don't lose yourself, that you can be idealistic and believe in good and not cynical. But we'll have to wait to see where the next episode takes us. Once again, 3 episodes. I'm kind of getting at these slowly but surely. So I'm excited to see where the next episode ultimately ends up taking us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.